And Mira, trying to figure out what to do with stocks right now is pretty confounding. The quarter stunk for all three of the averages. They were down anywhere from 3.6 to 7.1% for the quarter. And you have this headline risk that comes out of the Middle East at this point. How do you separate what's happening in the Middle East, the global concerns, the potential threats with the fundamentals for what stocks are doing right now?
There are two major things going on in the markets right now. One is this tension between sentiment and fundamentals, which I think will probably be with us for the whole year because it was with us before the war. And while right now market sentiment is very sensitive to headlines, if you look at the fundamentals within the economy, if there is a war going on, nobody told earnings estimates because you see earnings estimates for the S&P 500 going from 15% coming into the year to now 17% as we're on the eve of earnings season. So ultimately, it's actually looking like earnings could be even stronger than the prior 2 years when we had double-digit earnings growth. And a lot of the guidance you're getting from companies is still positive. Now, even if we see some of that revised back because of some of these challenges due to higher energy prices and higher input costs, you're still likely to end up with a year with very strong fundamentals paired with very sour sentiment.
So does that mean stocks look cheap to you at this point?
In some pockets, certainly. And what's been interesting, too, is while you see the VIX elevated and you see volatility overall high, you see single stock volatility even higher when you look at that constituent level volatility. So what's going on underneath the surface is it's unearthing a lot of different opportunities. You have about 58% of the stocks within the S&P 500 outperforming the index. And I know that's a relatively low bar, but that's still the highest share if we ended the year today since 2022 and 2010 before that. And usually what you tend to see in periods like this is correlations go up amongst stocks because everything goes down. But right now you're actually seeing relatively low correlations in the context of the last couple of years. And so that does create this environment for stock picking, even in sectors that are not doing well. I mean, financials is basically the worst performing sector this year, and yet you see 42% of stocks within that universe that are actually outperforming the index. So it does create some opportunities underneath the surface at the single stock level.
They're outperforming the index from a stock perspective or from an earnings perspective?
From a stock perspective.
From a stock perspective. I guess you look at the best performer in the Dow for the quarter, it was Chevron, up 35%. 10 out of 11 sectors were down for the month last month. The only one that was up was energy. And there is a real concern. Are these high energy prices going to continue? Because that will have an impact on many of these sectors. Industrials, I think, was the worst sector for the month.
Absolutely. So you have this shorter term sentiment challenge around energy, but you do have some of these longer term secular themes that are still playing out in the markets. I mean, you think about areas like industrials, materials, utilities. You still have this AI layer around infrastructure that's going to continue for many years. You look at some of the deal making that's going on, and it's still at the higher end, at the larger end of deals. Prolific considering all the uncertainty out there. So there are pockets where the fundamentals within companies are looking beyond some of these short-term challenges. But I agree with you that, look, the bounce that we're seeing in markets right now could be premature. It could be a little bit short-lived here, because if you don't see free movement of oil and those prices coming down, that is going to be more of a longer-term challenge. But again, you think about a year like 2022, where that continued to be a persistent challenge, but eventually you did see some relief there. And while it took a little while for the rest of the markets to recover, it set us up for a couple of years of really strong returns.
When it comes to AI, what do you like? Because the other issue you can watch is the destructive force of AI. The worst performer in the Dow for the last month was Salesforce, and that's because of the concern that AI is going to eat its lunch. What do you like when it comes to AI and big tech?
Now it's about this infrastructure layer where we're moving from the big spenders of capital to the recipients of capital. And again, you're seeing that across a lot of the value-oriented sectors, whether it's industrials, materials, utilities, that power story, all the different commodity inputs. I mean, tech has very much shifted from a capital-light industry to a very capital-heavy industry, and there's a lot of inputs required in that. So that's where we're still seeing, even year to date, despite some of the challenges over the last month, some success in different pockets of the market where that trade is actually still going on underneath the surface. And I don't think we can necessarily ignore tech either. I mean, you look at some areas like the Mag 7, which went from 29x in terms of valuations at the beginning of the year, now to 23x. So we want to be mindful of what you already own in your portfolio and that exposure. But you're seeing correlations even within the Mag 7 drop pretty significantly. So now you do have that opportunity to pick and choose in the areas where you do think has a little bit more longevity, even within that tech layer. But it's really about the recipients right now in terms of infrastructure when we think about the AI trade evolution. And also international. If you look at the big star performers outside of the U.S., it's not China or India, some of the big behemoths. It's Korea, it's Taiwan, it's that AI supply chain level. You're seeing some of that in Latin America as well. And that's also where you're seeing a lot of earnings growth. It's not the dollar, it's not valuations. I wouldn't invest in international because those two things look good. Because last year we saw that. We're seeing the exact opposite this year. But that
new quarter, second quarter is here, and there's optimism around the Iran war ending, and we continue to hear some language to that. So that has brought optimism yesterday and today. Does that continue? What do you think when you see these up arrows here this morning? Nobody knows exactly.
Good morning, Nicole. Yeah, there's so much to talk about. It's hard to get it all into a small segment. But breaking news right now, President Trump just said that the Iran president asked for a ceasefire, but President Trump says the Strait of Hormuz has to open first. Those are his quotes right now. Now, in terms of the overall market, markets are moving higher again this morning. They're off their highs pre-market, but look at the foreign markets rallied gigantically off yesterday's U.S. stock market. So we've got that going on. We've got big moves in yields. We've got moves of crude oil. Crude oil is now sitting right at just slightly over $100, but it was below $99 just about an hour ago. So the futures, the markets are moving all over. We've got a bunch of economic data out this morning. I would call it mixed. Mortgage apps was terrible. Based on based on the 30-year mortgages higher, but ADP was a good, solid number, 62,000 private payroll. So good numbers there. Retail sales better than expected. Now that's a February, a late number, but still a good, solid number out of retail sales. So we're getting all this information coming at us, and the market is consuming and digesting it as we get it. So as of right now, we're up about 1/3% on the E-minis, up about 0.6% on the NASDAQ to start the day. Gold, which was up over $100 about an hour ago, is still up 73. Markets are moving, Nicole, for sure.
You know, yesterday we were getting unconfirmed reports from the Iran foreign minister, Araghchi. First name is Abbas. And I had taken, 2 weeks ago, they put out everybody that could possibly lead Iran. And both President Masoud Pezeshkian was there, and Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi. And I'm not saying their names right, but the point is that the president seems amenable to everything. He talked about ending the war. He's been quoted in saying that and working with the administration. This Iran foreign minister is much tougher and, said they'll not accept a ceasefire. He's a lot tougher language. So I do wonder if there is some internal, dissent between the leaders there. In the meantime, we'll take it because it does seem like things are going in the right direction. And don't forget, U.S. has the firepower if they need it, right?
When you look at everything that's going on between the U.S. and Iran, we don't know what we can trust and what we can't trust. But it looks like the good news is if you take it all into account, the direction is going well, right? It looks like President Trump is going to adhere at least very closely to his 4 to 6 weeks plan for Iran. I think he wants to do that. I think Marco Rubio came out yesterday and gave a very precise 4 points of what they were looking for: destruction of ballistic missile capability, neutralizing their nuclear ambitions, degrading the naval and air power, and protecting U.S. forces. That's 4 specific intents for the U.S. Military activity. So I think everything is getting a little more clear. I think the tensions on crude oil and other markets are starting to dissipate. It's not going to be a straight line, but certainly yesterday's stock market was a pretty strong rally, and let's see what happens today. The foreign markets, like I said, were up big overnight. The Nikkei was up over 5%. So these markets are recovering the overall tensions, but we need headlines on the Strait of Hormuz, right? That's, I think, the next set of headlines to watch for. We got some yesterday, but we need more of those to fuel this market going higher. We need all the tensions to keep, as they're doing already, coming down, Nicole.
All right. So, and when we think about the prints that we've gotten in, I mean, mortgage apps last week were less than impressive. I saw like down 10%. There was nothing great there. We have seen rates come down a bit in the past week or so. I know we've gone from 398 up to basically 445 in a very, 3-4 weeks. So right now we're at 433 on the 10-year bond yield. Final thought maybe on some of the economic prints at all?
We were talking before I left about 30-year mortgage rates being below 6. Now they just moved from 6.43 to 6.57. That's why you're seeing basically a halt in mortgage apps and refinances. So that one part of the U.S. economy that is so sensitive to interest rates, that's suffering during this. But the numbers are starting to dissipate, so we'll watch for next week's applications. But this week's more horrible numbers, as the 30-year mortgage is now 6.57%. So that's problematic. That's one effect of everything that's happening. But like I said, if you're looking at the overall market in the big picture, the overall tensions and uncertainty are starting to come down, and you're seeing that show up in the stock.
President Trump telling the New York Post he's considering forcing Congress to return for a rare special session to resolve the record-long funding lapse for the Department of Homeland Security. Lawmakers currently on recess until April 14th, a date that would mark 2 full months without pay for this agency. This would be the first special session since 1948, when President Harry Truman forced Congress back to Washington for a debate on health care, civil rights, and Social Security. The only other comparable instance dates back to 1856, before the Civil War. Senate Republicans, meanwhile, preparing a budget reconciliation bill to fund DHS for 3 years without Democratic support, aiming to secure funding for agencies, including ICE, CBP, TSA, FEMA, and the Coast Guard. Joining me now is Georgia Congressman Richard McCormick. Congressman, your reaction to those comments from President Trump to the New York Post saying he will force you to come back?
I'm ready to go back to work. I know that we've done our part. We sent the CR back over to the Senate. What they did in the middle of the night, where they really had nobody on record, people don't realize they had no vote. They just had no opposition. And then they left town, went on their vacations. Very, very deceptive to me. We actually voted. We passed the CR, sent it back over to them, and said, let's fund the government. Let's get back to work. The fact that he's doing something, meaning the president, by calling us back, if he does that, people are going to say, oh, we haven't done that in ages. Well, we have also never frozen the government every year when we don't get our way from the minority. This is the longest times we've ever been shut down, twice now in a row. You can see they're trying to accomplish from the minority what they could never accomplish from the majority, and I think it's despicable.
Well, you know, Congressman, we've heard lots of whys as to why we are sitting here today with DHS still shut down, even though luckily TSA agents are not getting paychecks. But that was thanks to President Trump. I want to listen to Representative Lisa McClain and what she told Maria about the idea of reconciliation and where we go from here.
Well, I'm not going to roll the dice on passing another reconciliation bill with our national security. We're going to fund it. But explain to me why the funding is at zero in the bill that we got in the wee hours of the night, and that all the authority has been taken away from Homeland. It's not going to happen. House Republicans are not going to let that happen. Let's pass a clean CR for 60 days. Since we're in the middle of negotiation, it's passed the House in a bipartisan fashion. We even had some Democrats come along with us. The Senate seems to be willing to negotiate. Let's stop taking hostages while we negotiate. Let's pay the people. But let's make sure that our borders are secure and the American people are safe.
Do you have the support for a reconciliation package before the midterms?
We have a one-seat majority, Maria. I hope we could do a reconciliation, but hope isn't a strategy.
You know, Congressman, there's an article in the Hill today that kind of points out to kind of the battle here, and it says that Republicans worry about the uphill climb in paying for another bill that's going to be Republican-led only without any Democratic support. You've got that. And also, you know, if you do have the fiscal hawks start to come out and say, you know, wait a minute, you've got to make sure that there are pay-fors in this. The other side of this is if negotiations begin within you and your conference, that you and your colleagues are going to have things that you're going to want to confirm that you will support something else, a new path forward.
And sure, I consider myself one of those fiscal hawks. But we all came to the table. We realized we all have to make sacrifices. None of us were going to get our way. And we got it done. Nobody thought we can do 12 appropriations bills this year, yet we got it done. With the slimmest majorities, we continue to get it done. I think that's the great teamwork. You've never seen a more united Republican Party. I came in expecting a lot of gridlock inside my own party. I've never seen this kind of compromise inside of a party where I'm not getting my way. The moderates aren't getting their way, but we're getting it done. I think that's a really good sign that people keep on looking over. But quite frankly, this whole thing started back in 2020 during the last census when California, Illinois, and New York started losing congressional seats because people were moving out by the millions. And now we let in 13 congressional seats worth of people, and they don't want those people moved back out again, because they know they're going to lose power if they do that. This is their one hill to die on, because they believe if we start sending people who came here illegally back out of the country, they lose power, and that's what they're not willing to do.
Understood. And of course, you're talking about reconciliation, but then you're also talking about, you know, what about the $200 billion request from the Department of War to fund military operations? So there's a lot on the plate from a fiscal standpoint for you and your colleagues in the House. Also, with regards to Iran. So President Trump's set to address the nation tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I want to get your thoughts on that, because this is an important update on Iran. They are signaling the end of the Iran conflict is just weeks away. Listen to this.
I think we're 2 or 3 weeks. We'll leave, because there's no reason for us to do this. Look, now it's possible that we'll make a deal before that, because we'll hit bridges, and we've hit some. We'll hit some bridges. We've got a couple of nice bridges in mind. But if they come to the table, that'll be good. But it doesn't matter whether they come or not. We've set them back. It'll take 15 to 20 years for them to rebuild what we've done to them.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that President Trump told aides he's willing to end the conflict without reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE is reportedly preparing to join the fight to force the Strait open. Congressman, you spent 2 decades serving as a Marine and in the Navy. Your thoughts on where we are right now?
Well, one thing I actually like about the president, he doesn't give all of his hand. He has enough troops there, enough 82nd Airborne, 2 Marine Expeditionary Units to do pretty much anything he wants to, even on the ground if he needed to. I don't think he wants to put boots on the ground, but if we wanted to, we could take Carg Island pretty easily and maintain it. He could do almost anything, and that keeps everybody else off balance, unlike other presidents who have basically projected what they're going to do exactly on what date and what they're going to do, which is a horrible plan strategically and tactically. This president keeps you guessing, and I think that's a good thing when it comes to an enemy combatant and what plans we could or could not execute into the future.
Well, a UAE official said the Iranian regime thinks it's fighting for its existence and it's willing to bring the global economy down with a continued chokehold on the strait. Does that concern you?
Well, they are, absolutely. I mean, think about it. They have nobody of name that they can put in front of a camera and say, this is our leader, because they know it's whack-a-mole. And can you imagine being a leader in Iran right now going against Israel and the United States when they select to take you out? They have no leadership. If they topple, their people will literally turn on them and kill them. So this is their last gasp. And if they don't succeed, the people will rise up just like they did before. But they are willing to kill tens of thousands of their own unarmed civilians. Imagine what they would do to us if they got nuclear arms.